Over the many years, I've read a lot of light novels, and I mean a lot, probably too many, and I thought it was time to look at all of them, because I've read some fantastic series, and some not so great series. In this list, I'm going to talk about every, and I mean every light novel that I have read, and rank them in some kind of order, with a few rules. Firstly, I'm only including the series legally available in English. If it's not available legally in English, it's not on this list. I'm also including titles that I've read at least one volume of. And I'm not taking into consideration the anime, manga, or web novels. This is just the light novels themselves. And of course, if you enjoy this kind of content, leave a like and consider subscribing. And let me know your favourite titles in the comments below. And the title that is absolutely the worst light novel I have ever read is I'm a Behemoth, an S-rank monster, but mistaken for a cat. I live as an elf girl's pet, and honestly, this one is clearly a fetish story. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest, there are plenty of ecchi light novel titles in this list, but this one, no. A knight is reborn as a behemoth, the strongest monster, however, needs to grow up as a cute kitten. Fortunately, he's taken in as an elf girl's pet, and cue the boobs and the... Yes, this series goes into territories that I'm really not comfortable with, enough to completely put me off and just not want to read anymore. This seriously constantly talks about the main girl's breasts at every given opportunity, which completely overshadows the main plot, which, let's face it, it sounds interesting, but it's really not done particularly well. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest, there are a lot of reborn as thing light novels in this list. But this one, it just didn't really appeal to me. The entire read was a slog. It wasn't fun at all. And to be honest, the stuff it fetishized, it really put me off. It's not a great series at all. Buck Naked in Another World. Imagine a series where the main joke is that the guy is naked. That's right, in Buck Naked in Another World, our protagonist ends up in another world absolutely naked. And that's pretty much it. That's the running joke. While he gets clothes and such, he often finds that he'll quickly lose them for whatever reason. And of course, he ends up overpowered because of it. That's about it for it. I mean, the main joke is that he is naked, and there's not really much else to it. Yeah, they are trying to do some kind of interesting things, but to be honest, if you can't get away with the simple joke that he is going to be naked and he's going to have special powers because he's naked, you're not going to have a great time. And if you don't like that, there's very little else to keep you wanting to read more. At all. The next is a title that I see recommended so many times, and honestly, I really wanted to like this one. Reborn as a Space Mercenary is a title that just screams uniqueness in a world full of isekai fantasy titles. A young man who is very good at playing a specific space game is isekai'd into said space game. And what happens pretty much immediately? He is slapped in the face with an overpowered spaceship and the ability to pilot said overpowered spaceship. Yes, this is an overpowered series through and through, and to top it off, he's given a ton of money. And what does he buy with that money? Girls! That's right, the main protagonist goes out and buys girls for his spaceship, in the illusion that he's saving them from debt. It's kind of uncomfortable, and to be honest, this is very much similar to the author's other work, which we will get to later on in this video. But for me, it didn't really read particularly well, and honestly, I'm actually quite surprised at how much popularity this one actually has. It's not really a great series. It's a turn your brain off wish fulfillment story. I felt very uncomfortable with a lot of the content in here. It had a lot of potential, but for me, it just wasn't a great series. The Misfit of Demon King Academy. Yeah, this is yet another wish fulfillment overpowered character, however this one has a fantasy element on it.
Yep, there's gonna be quite a few on this list about this. Overpowered character being overpowered in a fantasy world. You know, we've seen it once, we've seen it so many times, and quite frankly, this series doesn't offer anything new to the table. At all.
Yeah, if you want a pretty generic overpowered character, except this time he's going to magic school, then you might like this one. But honestly, there was nothing in here for me. Bride of the Barrier Master. Ah yes, horrible people being horrible to each other, except this time it's a romance.
Bride of the Barrier Master was a title that I feel like just about everybody I knew was getting really excited for the light novel. And just about everybody I knew who actually read the light novel kind of felt it wasn't particularly great and probably worth just checking out the manga.
18-year-old Hannah has always been in the shadow of her older sister. However, she hides a secret. She secretly got a strong power. However, when a new head takes over another clan, she tries to steer clear, yet ends up in a marriage contract with him.
Now, if I'm perfectly honest, I felt the main character was pretty unlikable. But on top of that, the love interest was also unlikable. So, who am I supposed to root for in this particular series? The enemy?
SCP Foundation is one of the more bizarre light novels I've tried out. Now, I'm going to be honest, I have very little knowledge in SCP as a whole, and honestly, I kind of thought of them as just kind of spooky objects, like a cursed kettle or something like that.
So I thought that a light novel about SCP would make things a little bit more clear. How wrong I was.
If I'm honest, the novel itself is rather bland. It's as if the author had a checklist of things SCP that they had to fill out. Now, while we are introduced to Iris and a main character made especially for the light novel itself, we don't really learn much new about them, nor are their abilities really explained.
Now, from what I understand online is that pretty much anybody into SCP doesn't really like this light novel. They say it doesn't really add anything particularly worthwhile to the lore, and it's easier just to, well, read the wikis. I was hopeful that this would be a good introduction, and it kind of does the bare minimum, but I can't wholeheartedly recommend this title to anybody, really.
King of the Labyrinth is another title that just seems really cool idea, but ultimately doesn't really end up being that interesting.
A Minotaur is the boss of a floor. Its only purpose in life is to be killed by the heroes to advance to the next floor.
The Minotaur breaks the laws of the labyrinth and starts murdering everything in its path, becoming more and more powerful in the process.
Now, this one is brutal, and I mentioned that when I reviewed this a few years ago. It is a brutal title. But, if I'm perfectly honest, most of the first volume is literally just the Minotaur brutally murdering things in different ways. And if I'm quite honest, it kind of started getting a bit repetitive. There wasn't really much to it, and of course with the Minotaur being a monster that doesn't really have like any interactions apart from killing things, it doesn't really have much weight behind it.
Sadly, this series kind of fizzles out not long after the initial premise, and personally, I really struggled to even finish the volume I did. There are more volumes, but to be honest, I just wasn't interested in checking out any more. Liar Liar. Another recent light novel that I have read was Liar Liar, and again, it's another one that was just kind of okay.
A man transfers into Battle City, and almost immediately he beats the best person in this Battle City by accident. In order to stop everything imploding on itself because reasons, well, they try to concoct a reason and keep him overpowered.
Blandy McBlandface is given a mansion, a waifu maid, and just about everything he can think of. However, in reality his win was a fluke, and he's not really that great. But, to keep the lie, the powers that be are going to help him cheat, and keep the illusion that he's a winner.
This is just another wish fulfillment title. The main character is not interested in any kind of way. He's pretty much given everything, and the entire plot is making sure he's continuously given everything for very little reason. There's so little to this title that it's just not worth your time.
Division Maneuver. What happens when you get a 2-volume series that really only ever needed 1 volume? You get Division Maneuver.
The hero is reborn as a child and can only pilot the weakest of the machines. However, as to be expected, he's going to be super powerful and work his way to the top and win the heart of the cover girl, who looks a lot older than him. Yeah,
it's an ecchi series with a straight shorter romance. Now, if I'm perfectly honest, the battle scenes in this one were actually pretty good. And I really like the idea of it being a series about killing aliens in space. But that pairing is a bit too yikes for my comfort zone.
Division Maneuver isn't the worst thing out there. However, it has a lot of very uncomfortable material. But when it's good, it's actually extremely good. Fortunately, it's only 2 volumes long, so if the content in here is something that you might want or want to try out, you're not going to have a big investment. I mean, there's a lot worse out there. You could get syphilis or something. I really struggled whether or not to put Solo Leveling even on this list. Technically, it's not actually a light novel. But on the other hand, Yen Press technically included as one. I mean, I could include it with a lot of those other novels where I've just specifically chosen not to include them. For example, Tatami Galaxy, Night is Short, War on Girl, Foxtails, you know the ones. But I kind of felt because Yen Press do class Solo Leveling as a light novel, it probably should be on here.
Now, I'm talking light novels here. The webtoon of this one is an absolutely different beast, and seems to be where a lot of the praise comes from. Sung Jin Woo, originally a weak hunter, is given the ability to grow in strength without limit, and so he eventually becomes so overpowered as he looks to discover the mysteries of the dungeons.
Now, while this does do some things right, if I'm perfectly honest, in a world where we get so many overpowered characters, so many overpowered worlds, so many fantasy worlds, this one, if I'm perfectly honest, doesn't stand out at all. It doesn't do anything better than pretty much anything else on this list. It's kind of the most generic of generic titles. It's an awkward one because the manga or the manhwa is so well beloved. The novel isn't great.
Now, those were my least favourite light novels. Now, for the rest. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to go into depth on every single series, but will do so for those ones I feel deserve a little bit more explanation. If you want to know my exact opinion on some of these titles, feel free to ask in the comments. Next up, we have God's Games We Play. If RPGs had social media, King's Proposal, Orc Eroica, Busy Wizard, this warlock just wants to provide for his wives, The Rising of the Shield Hero, Berserk of Gluttony, The Extraordinary, The Ordinary, and Soap, Ari Ferretta, Last Round Authors, The Hero Laughs While Walking the Path of Vengeance a Second Time, Magistellus Bad Trip, My Youth Comedy Is Wrong, As I Expected, Eminence of Shadow. Yes, when it comes to comedy-based series, a series lives and dies on if you enjoy the humour. Personally, for Eminence and Shadow, I didn't really think this one was actually that funny, despite having a very interesting premise, which really removes a lot of what I actually got out of this series. Maybe someday I'll try this one again, but who knows. Middle-aged businessman, arise in another world. Our Last Crusade, or The Rise of a New World. Her Majesty's Swarm. Combat Butler and Automaton Waitress. misbehaving in another world. Are you okay with a slightly older girlfriend? So, this one is interesting. I'd actually rank this one a whole lot ton higher if it wasn't so much problematic content. A student saves a woman from a molester on the train. They fall in love, and it turns out she's 12 years older than him.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, this one does feel pretty well written, and the author does address a lot of the big issues between all of the things that arise from this.
Unfortunately for me, it just wasn't something that I wanted to continue with. I'm really not a fan of the Japanese mentality that if you are a woman and you're nearly 30 and unmarried, you're basically garbage. It's not something I agree with. It is a really outdated way of viewing people. And quite frankly, it was weird that that was the biggest problem presented in the series, other than the fact that, well, the main character is underage. If I'm perfectly honest, there is a lot of really sugary, sweet, cute romance stuff between the characters, and if the age gap was less problematic, I probably would have had a better time with it. So, if that doesn't bother you, go check this one out, because there might be enough in here that you'll get a lot of great content out of it.
These legs don't lie. The hidden dungeon only I can enter. Goblin Slayer. Classroom of the Elite. Ah yes, I was wondering when Classroom of the Elite would raise its head. I've said it once, and I'll say it again.
If I were 15 to 20 years younger, I would adore Classroom of the Elite. It is definitely the poster child for a teenage audience, and that's perfectly fine. Because I'm a bit older, a lot of the stuff just doesn't hit as it should.
When it's good, it's very good, but I just really didn't gel with the main character, and a lot of the side characters fell flat. Interestingly, a lot of the rival characters were slightly interesting. It often felt like a lot of the cast were insanely dumb, and a lot of the volumes just dragged on. Your former. Pretty Boy Detective Club. Survival with My Mistress. Survival with My Mistress, written by the same author as Space Mercenary, does exactly what it says on the tin. Kind of.
This one is the Minecraft Isekai, with monster girls.
Our protagonist ends up in a sticky situation and is saved by a beautiful dark elf, and they concoct a scheme where she'll pretend to own him.
And then, well, they have...
If I'm honest, I really like the idea of a Minecraft Isekai. It's just not something I've really seen done well before. And while this may not be one of the better series I've read, it is a little bit more honest with itself. You know what you're getting just by looking at the front cover. And for that, it does get at least a few pity points. Maiden of the Needle. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Isekai. Didn't I say to make my abilities average in the next life? Skeleton Knight in Another World. If the villainess and villain met and fall in love. Trapped in a dating sim. Suppose a kid from the Last Dungeon Boonies moves to a starter town. What can I say? This one was stupid, but sometimes I just want something that's stupid and fun. It's a very fun, random series that isn't going to test you intellectually. Zeroth Maria. Now, this is an interesting one in the fact that I think a lot of people adore it. But I read it and had a good enough time, but not enough that I really wanted to invest fully in the series. However, if it was easier to get, I probably would do and just buy the whole thing outright. By the grace of the gods. Dungeon Busters. Demon Lord 2099. Mushoku Tensei. Of course, Mushoku Tensei had to be on a top 100 light novel list. It's inconceivable that it wouldn't be.
Now, I have only read Volume 1 of Mushoku Tensei, and I read it a few years ago.
I liked what I read, but I really disliked the main character and have yet to be in the mood to see if he becomes a better person. Rest assured, once I eventually do get to this one, it'll be much higher on this list. But For now, there are so many series I just liked more than what I read of this one. Combatants will be dispatched. King of the Dead at the Dark Palace. Date A Live. I'm going to say it again, read volume 1. Liked what I read, never touched it again. Should I read more of this one? Who is your favourite girl? Monster Musume, the novel. I struggled for so long trying to decide to put this one on the list. I mean, it's a spin-off from the main series and I haven't included the One Piece Ace title in this one. But if I'm honest, it's a pretty good light novel on its own, and it stands out rather well. I've read this one a number of times if I just want a Monster Girl fix, and it's always a fun, if irrelevant, read. The hero is overpowered, but overly cautious. The girl I saved on the train turned out to be my childhood friend. Alya hides her feelings in Russian. Now, Alya hides her feelings in Russian is a really nice title with not only a cute protagonist but also a competent main character. It was a nice change of pace. I only read 2 volumes before dropping this one in favour of Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, but I liked what I read. I think in the new year I'm going to try and get back to this one. Banished from the Hero's Party. Reincarnated as a sword. My next life as a villainess. All routes lead to doom. Do you love your mom and her 2-hit multi-target attacks? Now, this one has got a unique gaming world, parodies a lot of stupid gaming conventions, it's got fun characters, it's stupid, it's got a bit of a heartwarming story. I think this one gets a lot of unjustified hate, if I'm honest.
Oh, and one more thing. They don't get together. I'm going to spoil that for you. She's his mom. I'm not really sure where you're getting the idea that they are going to get together.
Associate Professor Akira Takatsuki's Conjecture. Folklore Stories. Kokoro Connect. Now, Kokoro Connect wins the Forever Award of being the series that I completely forget about. But I really loved it when I read it. It's criminal that this one just didn't get a physical, and it's even more criminal that I constantly forget about it. It's on my list of series to go back to and fully read sometime. Ideal Sponge Life. High School DxD. Now, I really like the light novel for High School DxD, which is amazing because the anime is one of the cringiest series I've ever watched. Another one that I'd love to read more of given the time. Come on, someone pay me a monthly wage so I can read light novels all day. Please. Secrets of the Silent Witch. Really like the first volume of this one, even if it was just another Magic School one. We'll definitely go back to this one in the near future. VTuber Legend. Now, narrowly scratching out the top 50 is VTuber Legend. You guys know I love VTubers, and this one does a really good job of looking in on that industry and somehow making it a very fun light novel that doesn't rely on knowing its product. How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. I may be a guild receptionist, but I'll solo any boss to clock out on time. Now, this one is another recent addition to the list and one that I absolutely had a great time with.
A guild girl is sick of doing overtime. The reason being, well, she constantly has to do it because of all of the paperwork by dungeons and dungeon explorers. So what does she do? She decides to solo the dungeon to complete it to stop any extra requests coming in.
But honestly, I really like the main character. She too hates overtime and just wishes for a comfortable life, yet the world just keeps crapping on her. Very relatable, very fun series. Sasaki and Peeps. You like me? Not my daughter? A certain magical index. You know what I'm going to say here for this one, don't you? I've read one volume and no more. Higehiro. Bottom tier character Tomazaki. Monogatari. Now, a few years ago I listed both Monogatari and Katanagatari as 2 separate entities, but if I'm honest, I'm happy with them both sharing a number here. I think I enjoy Katanagatari a little bit more than Monogatari, but both are well excellent reads.
Part of me was wanting to rank all of these separately, because if I'm perfectly honest, Kizu Monogatari on its own is probably going to be in my top 10, or maybe just shy of it. However, the rest of the series, and having to bundle it all together, I kind of grew a bit fatigued with it, which made it drop quite a bit.
No matter if it's Kizu Monogatari, Bake Monogatari, or Katanagatari, all are great introductions to the franchise. Boogie Pop and others. Killing Slimes. Interspecies reviewers.
I can see it without a shadow of a doubt that Interspecies Reviewers is easily my second favourite Monster Girl title about having sex with monster girls.
The Angel Next Door spoils me rotten. Unnamed Memory. Apparently Disillusioned Adventures will save the world. Tia Moon Empire. Spy Classroom. That time, I got reincarnated as a slime. Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. Haruhi. Reign of the Seven Spellblades. The Faraway Paladin. Now, the Faraway Paladin will likely end up becoming one of my favourite series, and a must-read for people who want a well-written isekai. However, it kind of ended on a somewhat of a cliffhanger, and doesn't look like it's going to continue anytime soon. I hope to see it complete someday, because that will be very near the top of the list. Sound Euphonium. I will forever be salty that Sound Euphonium only ever got the one release by Yen Press. It is that good. It is a series that's worked so well on both the anime and the light novel, and it's absolutely worth hunting down a copy.
Sound Euphonium was actually one of the very first titles I read, and it's one I've went back to time and time again. And if I'm honest, I'll go back to it time and time again.
We don't see many series that focus on the arts, but Sound Euphonium and the next title are both excellent examples, and prove that this genre can work well in written form. Looks Are All You Need. Looks Are All You Need is a recent read, and perhaps a bit of recency bias has propelled it so far up this list. However, I feel it is somewhat justified.
It takes a lot of tropes and meshes them all together. For example, character with hidden abilities, the cute, needy little sister, V-singers, a school for gifted children. It meshes all of them together and brews them. And it works out rather well.
Looks Are All You Need is just a fun read, and it really opened my eyes to this author's work, and I really can't wait to read more of it. Slayers. The Tunnel to Summer, Exit of Goodbyes. Sabiki Bisco. Reborn as a vending machine, I now wander the dungeon. The NPCs in this village sim must be real. Now, I'm going to umbrella both Reborn as a vending machine and NPC in this village sim to be real under one here, as both were written by the same author and both are as good as each other.
There's something interesting about this author's works, because they always seem to pick something that is a little bit of a weird idea or a mundane idea, and then manage to turn them into rather compelling reads.
Vending Machine Isekai is the go-to butt of jokes isekai, but honestly, I feel like because we recently got the anime, a lot more people were actually willing to give it a try. A guy gets reborn as a vending machine in a fantasy world, and it is what it is. And honestly, this one is such a love letter to the vending machine world that Japan adores. It's somewhat likeable just on that alone.
How does a vending machine work in another world? How does it source all of its food and its materials? What do people think of the vending machine? All of this has been thought of, and the title really works.
NPCs in this world is another great read too. At only 3 volumes, it's not a big commitment, and it's pretty darn unique.
A loser is sent a mysterious meal with a brand new game to try. He tries it out and discovers it's a city sim where they have to look after the townsfolk of this particular village, maintain things and improve things as it goes along. He gets addicted and soon discovers it's not entirely what it seems.
Not only does this one have a good plot, it's also pretty motivational. Our protagonist actually decides to shape up and try and do better in life. He mends bridges and tries to become more of a member of society. All for a game. Torture Princess. Chitose is in the Ramen bottle. 4 books in and I'm still not sure where the Ramen bottle comes from. But this is a slice of life where the protagonist is actually popular and also has healthy relationships with his friends. A nice change of pace to the usual fare we get in a lot of these books. Monster Girl Doctor. You knew Monster Girl Doctor was coming at some point, and honestly, I kind of wish I could rank this one just a little bit higher than I have, if I'm perfectly honest. Monster Girl Doctor is an absolute fantastic blend of ecchi, slice of life, fantasy, harem, monster girls, and hospital appointments.
Its world has been thought out. The artwork is superb. The harem aspect has been, well, acknowledged. There is so many great things Monster Girl Doctor does. It's really underrated in my opinion.
If you aren't into ecchi, you can probably knock off around 60 points off this one, and I would happily agree. But for those who like ecchi, it's probably one of the best light novels out there that has it. Cooking with Wild Game. The Rascal Does Not Dream series. Apothecary Diaries. Wandering Witch. Tora Dora. 86. Volume 1 of 86 may just be one of the best series ever as a standalone volume. Honestly, it is absolutely fantastic, sending you on an emotional rollercoaster from start to finish. It doesn't feel like waste pages, nor does it need any more.
And then there was more.
While I wouldn't call later volumes of 86 bad by any means, I did feel that the impact of the first volume was diminished. But that first volume is so exceptional you can just read it and ignore everything else later, should you so desire. Re:Zero. Speaking of series that I'm waiting to finish, Re:Zero is another one. Absolutely adore this from start to finish so far, and it paints an absolute unique narrative.
A guy gets sent to another world and is very promptly killed off. He discovers that his special Pokemon power is, well, to be reborn again. If you think of it more as saving your progress, you would die and then you could load again from your save. With this new power, he decides that what he's going to do is, well, he's going to change things for the better. And thus, the tale of Subaru begins.
Re:Zero is absolutely one of the best series out there, and the only reason it just so fell out of the top 10 series for me is, well, there were just other series I just enjoyed that little bit more. Not a slight against the series at all, and it's absolutely worth your time. Amagi Brilliant Park and Full Metal Panic. Shoji Gato is one of my favourite authors, and both Amagi Brilliant Park and Full Metal Panic just so happen to be 2 of my favourite series. Now, while I'd argue Full Metal Panic is the better series overall, it is finished of course and was absolutely instrumental in me picking up light novels as a hobby. My heart also flutters to the crazy shenanigans of theme park management.
Both Amagi Brilliant Park and Full Metal Panic are absolutely fantastic titles that I really felt I had to lump together. The author knows what they're doing and I'm really excited to see where things turn out next.
Restaurant to Another World. You know, I think every time I do a top 10 list, Restaurant to Another World only just manages to miss the top 10 itself. Perhaps, when Volume 6 finally releases, it'll get its chance to shine.
But don't discredit this series for being number 11. Well, this one is an absolute gem of a series that is honestly still pretty unique.
Restaurant to Another World largely takes place in Nekoya, a restaurant that connects to another world once a week, and with that, it brings all kinds of customers through its doors, from wizards and warriors to adventurers, dragons and beastmen. Nothing is off the table.
Each chapter focuses on a different dish on the menu, and with that comes a little snippet of information about the character, the world and their love for food.
We often see the reason why these customers come through the door, and with each glimpse we see more of not only their personal lives but also the world around them.
And then comes the food satisfaction.
Of course we'd have to include the food, of course, and with each and every chapter you will be salivating at the meals on show. If you are someone who loves good food, you'll adore this one. The Saga of Tanya the Evil. As we enter the top 10, the first is a mainstay and probably one of the most iconic and unique isekai out there. The Saga of Tanya the Evil.
What can you say about Tanya the Evil that hasn't already been said? Well, if I'm perfectly honest, this one is something special.
A man upsets God and is reborn as a young girl on the losing side of an alternative version of World War I. However, they are not going to give up and dedicate everything to just staying alive.
What I love about this one is while Tanya is insanely overpowered, she is just one person and her army, her platoon, is just one small section of the overall army. While she does many amazing things, it becomes quite apparent that she is gonna fight an endless war that's just never gonna win.
There's just something great about this series and I just keep coming back to it. Each volume is absolutely huge, but it's fun seeing Tanya struggle with everything.
The first 2 or 3 volumes of Tanya the Evil are a slog. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. They are quite difficult to get through. However, as things go on, it does get a lot easier to read and things just get better and better. If you are struggling with the series, I would recommend keep pushing until at least volume 4 because it does get easier to read. But doesn't mean that the first few volumes aren't worth your time. Still, check all of it out. It is fantastic.
Bofuri, I don't want to get hurt, so I'll max out my defense is just about everything I want in a light novel sometimes.
Bofuri is an incredibly easy read and is absolutely perfect for those days where you just want to turn your brain off and have something easy and relaxing. It also ruined MMOs for me absolutely completely.
A girl who is scared to get hurt when playing the new VR MMO game puts all of her points into defense, and thus absolutely breaks the system because apparently developers never expected anyone to do such a thing.
Maple is overpowered in a different way to the norm, and it works out rather well. She puts all of her points into defense, and thus becomes almost impossible to kill. Of course, this comes at, well, lack of speed and lack of attack power, but these things are things that can be overcome. When you can't hurt somebody but they can chip away at you, well, it becomes something a little bit more lethal. And as she gets more and more powers to make herself more formidable while also starting to do damage, she literally breaks the game.
This is a cute girl does cute overpowered things series at heart, and is largely about Maple and her friends having fun in an online game, rather than having to save the world or collect waifu like other isekai.
Bofuri is one of those titles that is just so relaxing and so much fun that as soon as a volume comes out, I immediately have to buy it. It is such a really nice read.
So I'm a Spider So What recently ended its 16 volume run, and honestly, I can't recommend it enough.
This was one of the very first light novels I bought, back when I would look on the shelves and go, oh, that one looks stupid, I'm going to try it out. And you know what? I was rewarded.
A girl is isekai'd and reborn as a weak spider, who has almost zero chance of surviving. But in this world it's kill or be killed, and so she slowly begins to become more and more powerful.
There are so many twists and turns with this one that, you know what, it makes a unique read. And in my opinion, well, I like the ending. I know it's quite a hot topic when this series comes up that people don't like the ending, but if I'm perfectly honest, I liked it. Yes, it needed maybe another volume just to flesh things out a little bit, and some things kind of are left unresolved, but don't hold that against it. What we still have is a fantastic title worth your time.
Either way, the bulk of the story is fantastic and absolutely worth your time. J.K. Haru is a sex worker in another world. Have you ever found an isekai that manages to do just about everything it needed to in simply one volume? J.K. Haru is that series.
Okay, so this one actually has 2 volumes, a main volume and a bunch of side stories. And if I'm perfectly honest, the title alone is enough to put people off. But don't let it, because what we have here is one of the best titles out there. And if I was to put this any higher, even at number 1 or 2, I would still be pretty happy with it.
J.K. Haru is about a girl named Haru, a popular girl who ends up getting a raw deal when she's sent to another world with one of her classmates, an unpopular loser. And, unfortunately, she ends up having to work the oldest profession in the world.
What we have here is a very well written title. It knows exactly what it needs to be. It does well enough with the characters and the setting, but also comes away as something being very memorable. There are a lot of really good twists and turns in here that make this one of the essential isekai light novel titles. It is fantastic.
Infinite Dendrogram is far better than its anime would let you believe. Infinite Dendrogram is far better than its anime would let you believe.
Do I need to repeat myself for those at the back?
Infinite Dendrogram boasts a huge world with an ever-expanding cast of characters, goals and lore. If I were to compare it to anything else, it would be the equivalent of One Piece, or maybe stuff like Trails of Core Steel /Sky/Crossbell in terms of world building.
If I'm honest, the anime just didn't do this one justice at all.
Our protagonist, Ray Sterling, is in the world of Infinite Dendrogram, a fantastic online world with countless possibilities, and the embryo system.
The embryo system is kind of your devil fruit, quirks, JoJo stands, what have you. And they're all pretty darn unique and used quite well.
This series shines by not only being competent in its world building and characters, but also its fighting. If you're into Battle Shonen, this one is for you. The obligatory Spice and Wolf placement as we enter the top 5, and this one is one that I feel like I constantly see I love, but don't really have much to talk about with this one.
This one is considered a classic, and for all of the right reasons.
It follows a travelling merchant named Lawrence, who discovers a girl named Hollow on the back of his wagon. It turns out that Hollow is a wolf deity goddess. Feeling that the village she protects no longer needs her protection, they journey together towards her homeland in the north.
This one is a romance, but also economics, in a medieval world. You can pick up one volume and just be sucked in with the fun characters and the interesting way of writing. I recently reread this one, and honestly, I can't recommend it enough. It is such a great read that I want to go back and read it all.
Overlord. It was quite difficult getting Overlord off the top of its perch because it is that good, and it's always a great read. However, other series, I've started to feel a little bit better.
Overlord is one of the more recognisable and popular isekai series out there, and for all the right reasons.
Our protagonist ends up trapped in the game after the servers closed. However, he's already positioned as the final boss here. He's overpowered and commands an army of demons and monsters. He tries to find his friends and sets out and inevitably starts to conquer the world below.
Now, Overlord to me does what a good overpowered series should do. It makes the character stronger by making the world around them interesting and worth being crushed.
The first 3 volumes introduce us to Ainz, his underlings and some of the world around us. But from volume 4 onwards, this starts to shift to being about individual locations, building up the lore, its inhabitants and backstory before being crushed by Ainz or one of his minions.
If you're looking for your typical overpowered protagonists with a harem going to kill the Demon King, you're not going to find that here. Ainz has and will always be the final boss, no matter how he may be portrayed early on in the series. He is going to do some horrible things.
Konosuba. Shock. The title that is almost at the top of my lists is Konosuba, and here it's third.
Nothing wrong with that. This series is still fantastic.
A young man dies in the most pathetic of ways, and when meeting the goddess, she pisses him off so much he decides to pick her as the special gift to take with him to another world.
Sadly for Kazuma, his choice, this goddess, Aqua, is absolutely useless.
This is another series about horrible people being horrible to each other, and quite frankly, it works well because of it. The characters are never pushed to be aspirations, and are all obviously incredibly flawed. But the series always points that out, and you can have some fun with it.
Konosuba not only lampoons things like isekai, but also titles such as Dragon Quest and other RPGs. It also pokes fun at, well, your traditional isekai protagonist, who is also a bit pervy. Our main characters are likeable, but in no way should you see yourself as them.
Irina the Vampire Cosmonaut. Space, the final frontier. But for Irina the Vampire Cosmonaut, it remains out of reach for our protagonists.
Irina the Vampire Cosmonaut takes place in an alternative reality, and the space race is on. And not Russia, and not USA, are going to win the space race no matter what.
Each country is making major strides in the space race. However, they've hit a standstill, and until they can send someone into space, they're not going to advance. But using human test subjects, that would be morally wrong.
Vampires, on the other hand, they don't count as human.
Irina the Vampire Cosmonaut is a title that I just can't recommend enough, to the point it's propelled itself to the top of my favourites in the space of a few months. Each volume is intense enough with enough political intrigue, likeable characters, and inspirational that you just can't tear yourself away.
And it's not a difficult read either. At only 7 volumes, this one is looking very promising to be one of the perfect series out there. There is a lot of great times to be had with this one. It's thought-provoking while also pretty inspiring. And if I'm honest, we don't really see that many alternative history titles when it comes to light novels. Our protagonists are really likeable, and there's a lot of dark politics stuff that make this a little bit more interesting than your typical isekai. Ascendance of a Bookworm has become my all-time favourite light novel, and I'm not even done with it.
A girl who adores books is ultimately crushed by books themselves, and is reborn in another world where books aren't easily accessible, and to make matters worse, she's reborn as a poor and sickly child. What will mine do?
It starts off very slow. I'm going to be honest. I can understand where the criticism comes that the first 2 or 3 volumes are pretty slow, but it's simply laying the foundation for what's to come, and what's to come is something incredibly special.
As it starts out, the things mine experience is what a poor, sickly child would experience in a fantasy world. Not very much, maybe the limit of your own house or the surrounding houses, but over time, and over each arc, the world for her is expanded.
Mine is such a great protagonist. She's just focused on that one thing that is books, even if it causes chaos around her. And not only that, but we have such a great world around her. We have the perspectives of all of these different tiered of people. We have the soldiers, the merchants, the priests, the nobles, the rich, the poor. There is so much detail gone into this, and Mine's adventure, her quest for books, is going to be one that you won't forget. Ascendance of a Bookworm, once I got into it, was always going to end up being my favourite title. And honestly, I'm quite surprised that over the years, where titles such as Konosuba and Overlord continuously was stuck at the top of my list, it's nice to see 1 or 2 titles starting to get the better of them. Ascendance of a Bookworm, I'm not even finished part 4 yet, and I've heard part 5 just becomes better and better. I'm really excited to see how this one goes. But for now, it will remain my favourite.